It just sounds like there's a lot of holes in the policies, and
I don't know what kind of holes you're looking for, kid. There's no holes in the policy. I guarantee there's no holes in any policy. Wherever your head's going with that, there's no holes in the policy.
I know the names of the guys that hurt me, and neither of you have asked.
So as you are opening for any ceremony or any spell, you will want to open up the Watchtowers. I hail ye, guardians of the Watchtower of the North, element of earth, powers of earth, I ask you to accompany me into your dimension.
The Watchtower Society didn't want to acknowledge that these girls were telling the truth because they were accusing elders of molesting them.
I do summon, stir, and call you now to witness this rite and guard this circle. Open up the Watchtowers.
There are a lot of people that have been sexually abused, and it's all been swept under the rug because of the two-witness rule.
Open up the Watchtowers.
You can't apply that rule to sexual assault. You can't.
Where is there going to be two witnesses to such a crime?
In settling, the church did not acknowledge wrongdoing. Now, evidence has surfaced that leaders did know about some of the men, but apparently never informed authorities.
Documents show the church knew he was abusing kids as early as the 1970s and stripped him of his leadership role for a while, but apparently never alerted police. He was finally arrested in 1994 and went to prison, having molested children for 2 decades.
Open up the Watchtowers.
In the name of I call unto ye, lords of the Watchtowers of the West, ye lords of water. I do summon, stir, and call ye up to stand guard over this circle, and witness this rite. Hail and welcome.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Occult Rejects with your hosts Lux
and the NY Patriot.
And today we have a continuation of the interview that we had with a really amazing guest by the name of Jack Pine, who is a Jehovah's Witness whistleblower. And it's just an awesome guest. We can't believe how brave he is to come out and talk about the stuff that he's talking about. But so just a quick recap. Last week we went over sort of the early years of his life in the church, what it was like to grow up in that environment of Jehovah's Witness. And this week we wanted to sort of focus a bit more on the things that made him second guess stuff and sort of the occultism, the pedophilia, and everything that that the church tries to keep hidden.
Yeah, and all the reasons why I made it on this show.
Yeah, seriously, it's absolutely crazy how much occultism is integrated into this.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said earlier myself, I never would have thought of it until Jack started showing me shit, and I was like, yo, that's quite obvious to me.
Yeah, and that it's such deep occult stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like surface level, they're deep into the occult.
These mofos knew what they were doing and they were connected.
Yeah, right, in the early years especially.
But yeah, I think this will be another great episode. We start getting into some of the juicy stuff, as Lux would call it. So,
yeah.
So, hope you all enjoy this one. And before I forget, that ritual that you just saw at the end of the intro, that was the Watchtower ritual being done in a Thelemic evocation, the evocation of Babylon. Just wanted to say that. I wanted to put that out there before we started rolling in case people are like, what the fuck was that I just saw? Just wanted to let you know real quick, that is the Watchtower ritual. And I'll leave it with you, Lux.
This episode is going to focus more on the research that he's done and sort of what we did alongside of that. And I guess, Jack, if you want to give us an insight as to what you've been researching and what you found, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So, when I started looking elsewhere for information, I think initially the first book I came across was a guy named Jim Mars that wrote a book called Ruled by Secrecy.
Oh, shit, I heard of Jim Mars. Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of my introduction, like, into the more of a conspiratorial world, and it just kind of grew from there. So learning some of the things that I learned from that book, looking into it, found it to be true. Some things I couldn't prove, but who knows, I might not be looking in the right areas. But it kind of poked holes in their theology. And so it made me think, maybe they don't know what they're talking about. And so I just started looking further. So, I think most people probably start with Alex Jones and, watching, like, hearing InfoWars and hearing about Bohemian Grove.
Watching his forehead turn red and veins pop out.
Right. Hey, he's entertaining to watch.
Listen. Back in the day, he was one of the originals that I was watching too. So.
Oh yeah. And no disrespect to him. I know a lot of people have their opinions, but he helped point me in the right directions to start looking.
I'll even put it this way. I mean, the guy's been around for so long. I mean, you got to give him credit at this point, regardless if it's bullshit or not. He's been consistent.
Yeah,
even if he is on the whole thing, then I mean, he's certainly woken up a lot of people in the process, whatever that is. But he definitely has.
Yeah, man. So I started coming across.
The one thing I wanted to ask you real quick. Now, when you said that you started thinking that maybe they didn't know or something was wrong, were you ever thinking that there was like something bad behind it, or did you just think that maybe they were just misled? You know what I'm saying? Like, you were originally already thinking that maybe there was like something like kind of screwed up behind it?
Well, I wasn't sure, and I'll tell you what it was. So the first thing I think I mentioned before about the person I knew who had suffered from ritual abuse from somebody within the organization.
Oh yeah, that's right. You told me that.
That made me question it, and that's actually what made me look in that direction, like for conspiratorial things.
Wow.
Because nobody else was talking about satanic ritual abuse or things of that caliber. Of course, everybody talks about Freemasonry. Everybody has a different idea about the Illuminati, whatever people think that is. But I started, really diving deep into all those. So I came across Fritz Springmeier, his books, The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And he also wrote The Watchtower and the Masons. And he wrote another book, I think something like Be Cautious as Serpents, something along those lines. But I started reading like the information he put out, and I wasn't sure if I believed everything that he said, but from what I had seen from my friend and what he was saying with satanic ritual abuse, it seemed to match up pretty good. And so I still had questions, but I didn't think that the organization was doing it themselves, but I was thinking possibly some kind of coven or satanic group had infiltrated into it. And the way Fritz Springmeier puts it is he just thinks that, Russell was one of the 13 bloodlines, and it just grew from that. And it sounds, everybody has a different take on it. I still don't believe everything that he was saying, but, he works with a lot of people, I think in some kind of deliverance ministry. So I know a lot of those people are suffering from something horrible. Like, even if it's not what they think it is, it was definitely horrible experiences in their life. And so I definitely have empathy for anybody that's gone through any of that stuff. I think what really did it is there was a hip hop album I had listened to with this guy DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill and another guy named Sick Jack, and did an album together called Legend of the Mask. And it was all about Masonry and the Knights Templar and anything conspiratorial like you want to talk about. And looking in the jacket of the CD, it kind of gave the inspiration for, this song or that song. And I think that's initially how I came across that 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And I looked up a YouTube video of a talk that Springmeier had given on it. And he had mentioned Russell and the witnesses being involved in this group. And I didn't know if it was true or not. The first thing a witness would say is, that's apostate lies. And it very well could be propaganda, that he doesn't know what he's talking about, or they're not connected. But it freaked me out to my core. My heart started racing, and it was almost like I had a panic attack in that moment, like thinking, am I part of the problem? Like, everything that we've been taught we're preaching against and fighting against, are they lying and we're part of it? And I didn't know. So I actually dove further to try and disprove it. But in doing so, I've just found more and more information that just made me more and more uncomfortable, whether they are a part of that group or not.
I was going to say, with the amount of stuff that you've probably still have to talk about, and that me and Lux have seen, researching, even if that's wrong, there's still something there that's not right.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and they really tried to do a hit job on Springmeier. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But they really went hard after him after he released a couple of those books. They tried to discredit his entire past and really cast a bad shadow on sort of, his life as a whole, which is, that's always suspicious to me when they go out of the way to try and wreck someone's life or to make them
like the Scientologists do.
Yeah. Like, that's a red flag.
Right. I mean, he was just a minister that self-published some books. Like, why go after somebody that doesn't really have a big congregation or anything? That's what makes me kind of suspicious of the whole thing. I feel bad for the guy, honestly. I'm not saying he's not right or not. Like, I don't know. I don't think anybody does. But yeah, I don't know. I am glad he put out the information, though, because I think it got a lot of people looking in a lot of different directions, and a lot of things are being discovered.
We have this weird thing that's going on in society now too, where people, if you're presenting real information, right, you gotta remember that it's like the message is over the messenger. The message is more important than the person who's delivering that message. And we all have things that have been messed up in our past. Of course, if they're really crazy and involved in truly harming someone or something like that, then they should be taken, less serious. But I mean, it's just, as soon as they can discredit someone, they'll use any excuse to do it,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So what did you find sort of in that next step of research? Did you see anything, what made you sort of say, whoa, this is it, I'm done?
Man. So there was, I was still, I was questioning things, but I still kind of believed it, even though, went through the disfellowshipping and came back. There was a convention that I had gone to, and I started hearing a lot about human trafficking, and I had actually joined an anti-human trafficking organization. And in doing so, just became more educated about it and what the real numbers are, how horrible it is. It's not, people, the media says human trafficking, and they're like, no, you mean child rape that you pay for? And so, I mean, that's just the truth of it. And So I got really involved. Well, I was sitting at a convention listening to what they were saying, and they came out and warned against apostates. And they said, be concerned about people who are overly concerned with children's welfare.
Wow.
And I was, that's what I thought. And both my wife and I looked at each other, and I was like, what? And I remember leaning forward, and I'm looking around, the stadium with like thousands of other witnesses in there, seeing if anybody else was like caught off guard by it. And it was like everybody was just zoned out. Just nobody, I mean, I don't know, but not that I could see that was noticeable. But for me, I was kind of like, something's wrong, because I had heard about the pedophilia allegations, and I'm sure there's some people that, makes things up, but I believe the majority of those stories are true. Like, why put yourself in that kind of light if it's not true? Because one, it's super embarrassing for the person to have to admit that to anyone, and it's no fault of their own. But people don't come out and just say that unless, but they spin it like, oh, they're after money, or they're just trying to take, God's organization down. And it's an attack from Satan.
Wow. Is there any specific cases that on that you kind of wanted to cover when it comes to that stuff?
I think the biggest one for me, what really put me over the edge was the Australian Royal Commission. When that came out, the reason why is witnesses believe that it was like a hit job from apostates. But what they don't realize is the Australian Royal Commission wasn't just going after Jehovah's Witnesses. They were going after several different organizations that had allegations of child abuse. And it was just a government investigation into all of these groups. And on top of it, the Jehovah's Witness governing body volunteered to be there to give statements and be on the witness stand. But what did it for me was I watched a governing body member lie on the stand, and you can try and spin it and say he wasn't lying, or maybe he didn't know, or maybe he was lying by omission. But even if you're lying by omission, it's still a lie. So I was just, at that point, I was done. But it came out in that case, there were 1,006 pedophiles from the 1950s to present day that had committed 1,800 crimes against children. And it was not reported to the authorities. And this is what came out during that case. And so growing up as a witness, they bashed the Catholic Church quite a bit. And for the pedophilia and stuff that was happening, there were stories about nuns having to get abortions and different things. But the truth came out, about the Catholic Church. And witnesses just grabbed onto that and said, see, we're nothing like them. Well, if you look at the numbers, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of Catholics there are around the world, but there's only about 8 million, maybe 8.5 million.
Yeah, that's what I saw, 8.5 million. Yeah,
Jehovah's Witnesses. And so if you look at the peer research reviews of allegations, like the percentage of Jehovah's Witnesses are way higher in child abuse and sexual allegations than the Catholic Church. Now, the number of the Catholic Church would be higher because there are more members. But considering how relatively small the Jehovah's Witnesses are...
Yeah, if you were to make that the same size, it would probably be way worse, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. See, that's something I didn't know, and maybe other people had no idea either.
Yeah, and I want to say this.
What was the name, before you forget, before I forget to ask you again, what was the name of that? Because you can put that in, and you can go watch a bunch of that on YouTube, what this case you're talking about. If people want to go look.
The Australian Royal Commission.
Yes, you can go and find some of that stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, I think the entire testimony is on there, and the hearings.
You can even go online and find I think what their findings were, and find all like what they decided at the end.
Yeah, you can.
It's
so
not
it's
fake,
all
it's
in
a real
writing.
case.
It's official from the government, but they look at it, like I said, they look at it as an attack from apostates. And the reason why they do that, somebody had leaked information to the attorney that was questioning the organization. And it basically was the manual to start they call it Bethel, is one of basically their main headquarters on whatever continent they're on, or country that they're in. And it's where they do the printing work for that specific country.
And it's called
and
the
it's
Bethel?
just kind of like, a base of operations.
Yeah, because I know that other guy had not Bethel, but he had Beth Serene. So I thought that sounded familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's another thing we'll get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they had leaked that to the opposing counsel. So they had some ammunition as far as, what their, they're structured. So they'd really know the detailed structure of the organization, and they could kind of call out anybody if they were lying on the stand, which that attorney did. He did an excellent job. I've never seen somebody backpedal that hard before.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you remember?
I don't. I'd have to look at it. I want to say it was around I don't even want to say. I don't remember
2016 in my head, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think somewhere. It's relatively more recent. It is more recent.
Yeah, you're right, because they really rounded up a bunch of people with that commission, especially around like 2016 and 2017 with the abuse of kids. It's, you can say what you want about Australia, but wow, they at least they're trying to get these people exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't do anything, but I mean, at least they brought it up, I guess. I mean, it's right, something. It's a step in the right direction.
Did they not do anything about that?
They did change some policies. They had kind of gotten rid of you guys had asked about the 2 witness rule. And I think that's what led to a lot of justice not happening, because there wasn't 2 witnesses, or the person wasn't admitting to it. And so that's usually how things got hidden. But overall, it was just, they didn't want to they would say, you don't want to give Jehovah a bad name, but really it's the organization, that their policies that are in place, but they look as the organization as being God's Spirit directed organization is how they put it. So essentially, if you go against the organization, you're going against God. And so to put them in a bad light would to be putting Jehovah in a bad light to them. So again, it's like guilt placed on top of a victim that's already going through so much, and then they can't get justice. And then they're told, well, it'll all be taken care of in the paradise. Like Jehovah's justice will be served at Armageddon. So whoever deserves it will be destroyed, and whoever's supposed to be in the paradise will be there, is basically what you're told.
Wow. I mean, that's even such deep mind control, because, well, if you're saying Jehovah is your God and that these things are happening in the churches by men, and that's supposed to give God a bad name, that makes no sense at all. It's just the fact that, your people are being exposed because of this terrible stuff that they're doing. I'm not sure that a news report could give God a bad name.
Right, exactly. That was one of the things my elder committee, like when I was getting this fellowship, because I did feel guilty about what I had done. And I said, I feel bad. I don't want to, give Jehovah a bad name or the organization. And my elders, they were actually very kind to me, but they were like, don't worry about Jehovah. He can take care of himself. And so when they said that, it made me immediately start thinking about all these child abuse allegations. Like, okay, then why don't you go tell the police? Because God can take care of himself.
Right.
Very good point.
That's an amazing point. Yeah.
So now that was pretty much the only like pedophilia stuff you really had to cover, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was the Candace Conti case. I think maybe if your listeners have watched that Vice documentary.
Yeah,
that
I
they
had it
did
a little
on
bit that I
Twitter.
was going to actually talk about her. If you want, I mean, we can cover her now, and then I want to go back to your occult stuff. But I did have a clip from the news that I was actually going to put up in here with like samples and stuff about her case and everything, and then talk about it after the fact.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to splice that in here, and then we will talk about it after.
You're about to meet a young woman raised as a Jehovah's Witness who says she was molested by a fellow church member and that the church had been protecting pedophiles within their midst. Now alleged victims from across the country are coming out with claims of their own.
When Candace was 9 years old, she says she was abused by a well-liked member of her small congregation in Fremont, California. While door-to-door evangelizing, which Candace would often do without her parents, she says Jonathan Kendrick began taking her to his house and molesting her.
I don't really want to go into everything else because I don't have nightmares.
Right. Understood. She testified that he abused her several times a month for what she says felt like 2 years.
When you were a kid, why did you feel like you couldn't come forward?
Bringing that up just would demolish the only people that I knew. I think I was scared too.
So it was only years later, after she'd grown up and left the church, when she found Jonathan Kendrick on the sex offender registry for abusing another child in a different congregation, and she finally decided to act.
Do you recall becoming aware at any time of sexual abuse of a child by Jonathan Kendrick?
Yes.
Even before Candace was abused, the elders knew that Jonathan Kendrick, who then held a leadership position in the congregation, had molested his own stepdaughter, his first known victim.
He confessed to touching her one evening when he came home.
And yet the elders did not call the police and did not warn the rest of the congregation.
What was the reason that the congregation was not notified?
We don't make that public to the congregation. It's confidential.
A confidentiality policy set by the church leaders back in New York. You may remember that Candace only decided to step forward after learning that Kendrick had abused another child, a crime that landed him in jail for 7 months. That child, Kendrick's third alleged victim, was his wife's 7-year-old granddaughter.
Can we ask you about the case with your granddaughter?
No, you can't,
Why not?
because it's none of your business. He paid for that crime.
All right, so that was a little bit about Candace Conti's story. I'm going to read a little bit here from realnews.org. California court guts child abuse ruling against Jehovah's Witness. This is back in April 14, 2015. Candace Conti drew worldwide attention in her fight against the Jehovah's Witness when a jury awarded her $28 million in damages, the largest verdict for a single victim of child abuse against a religious organization in U.S. history. The amount was later reduced to $15.6 million, including $8.6 million in punitive damages. Now, 3 years later, an appeals court has eroded her courtroom victory even further by ruling that the leadership of the Jehovah's Witnesses had no duty to warn congregants that a confessed child molester was one of their own. As a result, judges eliminated the punitive damages in that case. Conti still stands to receive $2.8 million. That's screwed up. She admits to Kendrick, the one that she says that had molested her, had admitted to North Fremont congregation elders that he had sexually abused his stepdaughter. The elders informed the Watchtower of Kendrick's confession in 1993, but in accordance with the Watchtower policy, did not notify police or warn the congregation. So, that's some shit right there with her story.
No, I think honestly, no, if you were to take an independent look and you were to say, okay, well, does this type of pedophilia stuff happen in schools? Well, sure, it happens in just regular public schools. Does it happen in other aspects of life, like, people, maybe leaders at the YMCA or the Boy Scouts or something? Yeah, okay, maybe it does. So for the argument, well, this just happens everywhere, okay. But when you have these people who are in high leadership positions in important religious churches and practices, secret societies, I mean, it's way different to me because there's such a moral connection to these people who are often in high positions of power, who are trying to exclaim that, this is the great work, or that this is the way that people should be, to purify themselves, make themselves better for Jehovah or whatever it is that they're talking about. Is way, way different, because the moral culpability of that is you're not practicing what you preach.
I just find the whole thing behind, like, we don't have to tell anybody, is just mind blowing.
Yeah, it's almost it's like an active cover up on all of these different things that we've looked at, especially this one.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a video that got leaked. They showed a clip of it on that Vice documentary, but it's basically somebody from their legal department or a representative of the legal department. I'm not sure who the person was, but they were basically getting the information out there for elders that have taken down information, to any personal notes that you have on it. Like, keep the official records, like whatever goes in the file, but any notes that you have on it, to destroy those. Because if they said Satan's coming after us and he's going to use that against us, so we don't want it to look like there are more cases than there actually are, is how they spun it. And I believe that, but I don't think they're trying to hide all of it. They know that there's a problem there. That documentary did a great job, though. I mean, when they sent all those blue envelopes back to the organization, I mean, it created a database of of pedophiles for an organization, and it just became a huge problem for them.
See, this is something that I had thought about, and I don't want to get too off because I still want to go back to the occult stuff. But me and Lux had even talked about it. Now they had like file cabinets of, like, if there was ever, a thing was ever brought to the elders, like they kept like minutes on it, I guess you would call it, or like notes, and like what was said and what was done. Didn't they have like file cabinets at one place of like all these things? And
that was basically the congregations that meet in a particular kingdom hall. There are files there.
I know Palmer congregation was one of them, where some of their stuff had gotten leaked out, and I think the guy Mark that is with Kimberly is kind of involved in trying to get that out. But I do know in the past, the feds, I'm not sure which one it was, I should have looked it up. I think you can find it, went to go seize these files from one of them, and when they got there, they were like completely empty. And the thing was, me and Lux were like, what's the point of having all these things and saving all of it? Because one, it's proof of that something's going on, and then that you didn't say anything. Why would you want any of that around? You know what I'm saying? Or you're taking all this stuff down, but you're taking all this evidence down, or these, what people are saying, but you're not presenting it to the law enforcement. So there's no point of it either way. And I was like, could it be possibly like maybe some of them are worth to keep because of blackmail?
Right.
Let's remember these situations just in case.
Yeah, the way it was always spun to the members was, I mean, there's a file on me, there's a file on my wife, there's a file on anybody who had become what they call a publisher, somebody that goes door to door. So you can be a publisher and not be baptized, but there's a file on everybody. Like a lot of other, high control groups, they all have files on their members. And so hopefully, it's not for a nefarious thing. I haven't personally seen that myself, and I don't want to claim that it is. But it was to, if somebody has a problem, I don't know, if a brother like had a pornography problem, and when he goes to the next congregation, like whatever elders he's dealing with, they might have an idea, oh, okay, he may need encouragement in this area to get him to stop with this issue, or whatever it might be. So that's kind of how it was always spun to its members. But I know what you guys are saying, it's like it could be a honeypot,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That way, in case anybody ever gets out of line, then you can just look through their file.
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
That's a good thought.
You want to go into any the cult stuff now that you found?
Yeah. So once I started looking, a name that came up over and over again was Aleister Crowley, and just in the conspiratorial realm. And of course, from there, I found William Ramsey's work, and that's how I actually got in contact with William Ramsey. I saw one of his documentaries that he had done. It was like on Amazon Prime, and I watched it, and I ended up messaging him on Facebook when he had one. And from there, we just would trade information back and forth, anything I might have found on Crowley. Not a whole lot. Like, that guy does some serious research. Like, I would like to be on his level. But yeah, and in doing so, I started hearing about like Enochian magic. Then the idea of watchtowers came up, and that struck a chord with me, being a witness, because their main like monthly magazine, at least back then, it was the Watchtower and Awake magazine. And so when I looked into what watchtowers were, I had gotten that occult encyclopedia, and I was at some bookstore, and I was looking through it, and I was like, I had read something online about watchtowers, and I was like, oh yeah, here it is. And just basically, depending on what the belief system is, whether it's Wiccan or you're talking about something John Dee did, but these fallen angels or watchers or Grigori, whatever you want to call them, were basically controlling the entry points to the north, east, south, and west. So the 4 cardinal points, they were opening or closing the gateway, and that really started getting me to look at that. And then I started seeing connections between Crowley and Gerald Garner, and Crowley being involved with the Golden Dawn and being a Freemason, and then being in the O.T.O and starting the AA.
That's something I want to actually mention real quick. I don't know how many people know, but Crowley was a big influence on Gerald Gardner. He was a member of the O.T.O. Crowley did even give him permission to open up his own lodge if he had wanted to. I don't think he did, but he ended up going on to start Wicca. And a lot of, I hate to say, in case anybody's into Wicca and doesn't know this, there is a lot of Crowley influence in there. There's a lot of the Book of the Law is actually almost quoted word for word in the Charge of the Goddess. So, and Wicca is very big with calling on watchtowers.
Right.
If you get into very ceremonial Wicca, like Alexandrian and Gardarian, however you say his name, those I'm pretty sure you'll be calling watchtowers.
Yeah, have you guys dealt with any of that yourselves?
I knew of the ritual. I had never really, it's a little bit more of a long drawn out one. It can be done on its own, but I know a lot of times it's been done with like a few people. So it was never something I had gotten too interested in doing,
Gotcha.
Yeah, for me, it was a ritual that I wasn't even knowledgeable that I was participating in, but was participating in it without even me knowing what it was, sort of in the beginning. And then as time, it even expresses itself in the initiation for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But as time goes on, then yeah, that is something that's done typically around different solstices and stuff like that. But yeah, I've been involved with that ritual.
I mean, like the ritual that this episode started off with was that was an evocation of Babylon, and that was at a O.T.O temple, or at least someone in the O.T.O, maybe their personal temple. I'm not going to say exactly who it is, but it's, real member. They have their own channel. That's where it came from. That is the evocation of Babylon. And they are opening that up with calling the Watchtowers. So now, you can call the Watchtowers in, like I said, Wicca. You can call it in Thelemic magic. You can use it in also, Golden Dawn. It's almost kind of like how I would say the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Me and Lux could both use that, and we're both from two different things. It's almost like a basic bread and butter ritual to start off maybe the rest of what you're going to do. So it's kind of like you would call the Watchtowers, and then you would evoke Babylon. After the
okay.
You know what I'm saying?
What you can
it's like
also
a preliminary ritual to what you want to evoke or invoke.
Yeah, because you would do for the opening of the Watchtower ritual, you're going to do a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, along with a banishing ritual of the hexagram, and then you could essentially call up any of the energies of one of the four towers that you really wanted to, for whatever reason, right? So that was a common practice for us.
Yeah, and then I also know a lot of times now we show the Enochian tablets. It's also used for Enochian magic.
Oh, absolutely, it is. It's very important.
That's like that would be like the LBRP to if I wanted to invoke Jupiter, I'm going to do the LBRP first, then I'm going to banish the planetary energies with the lesser hexagram, and then if I wanted to get fancy, then I could actually just particularly do the greater hexagram to invoke Jupiter. That would be that whole spiel right there would be their Watchtower would start off all that to for whatever they want to obtain.
I was just going to ask, this is what I take away, when I hear ceremonial magicians talking to other ceremonial magicians. In each other's company, I feel like they sometimes admit to actually coming in contact with some kind of entity, whatever label they want to put on it, planetary intelligence, whatever it is. But then in the public view, when you're talking to somebody like me or somebody not initiated in that they chalk it up to being more psychological, that you're getting in contact with part of your subconscious, basically trying. So how do you guys take that in your opinion?
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know about on my show. Maybe if I wasn't asked correctly, or it depends on the question. But in real life, sometimes I might be asked certain things, and for me to try to really explain what I think about it, the truth is, would neither be so hard to or so outlandish. It's almost easier for me to give them kind of a little crumb for them to maybe understand, and hopefully maybe one day they'll see that to grow into something else.
Okay, so
I mean, it's not to hide anything. It's just the people. It's you got 8 hours to listen. You know what I'm saying?
I gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of almost, somebody wants to hear the idea of, well, what do you think is going on in this world? To break everything down that you've read for the last 20 years and put it into 10 minutes, you're not going to be able to do it, or make somebody believe what you think.
Yeah.
It's something along that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the Golden Dawn, at least, we were told that, what is presented to the public is meant to be their own purpose. And this is sort of the version that they get. And then there's another version on the interior. So for me, I definitely experienced that.
Oh, well, I mean, for initiations, that we were told we cannot mention or anything, talk about. I mean, you're not supposed to show inside of the temple. If I took pictures of stuff, I really shouldn't be showing it on my own.
Yeah.
Degrees, I'm not supposed to talk about anybody's or mine, or I mean, it's supposed to be very confidential, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and it does seem, at least in the Golden Dawn, that they do sort of, and then with some other occult groups, that they do kind of, they present this idea that, oh, well, it's all an allegory for the mind or something like that. But I mean, I will definitely say that we were in contact with entities or with whatever you want to classify that as, intelligences that we were literally trying to channel in order to come into some communion with. So
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's been times when there's experiences that I've had that I could say I believe I've definitely gone somewhere else, or at least came in contact with other things for sure. To try to explain that sometimes to somebody is so hard that it's almost easier to try to give like an allegory of like some psychological mumbo jumbo that can almost get the same thing across, but it won't be that effective, because the person will never have that experience anyway, more than likely. Do you understand what I'm
and
getting
you don't
at?
want to sound crazy.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. No, for real, and that's what it is too. Because it's just like there's some shit I could say where people are like, whoa,
right?
And, I'll do it on other people's shows because I don't give a shit. But you start getting into like Moon Matrix and Saturn and shit, and some people can just you can lose them with that. But that is stuff in occultism too. So
yeah,
there's all sorts of weird shit.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll have to work on you guys with that later then.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
so now, I know you had looked into some stuff with C.J. Rutherford, and I think there was some. One of your things that you did, I saw that you were showing like information about someone who wrote a book that I think the witnesses might have been inspired from, and it had an ankh on the cover of it. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I think that's actually from your page.
Oh, yeah. So
see, now I did want to say I actually used to own that same ankh. I had a necklace, and I would wear that during my rituals. I mean, that wasn't a specific one that people were supposed to buy, but it was a necklace I found on like a pagan shop, and I bought it and I used it in my rituals. Same fucking one.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So my son, his grandmother who's very Catholic, had bought him a cross, and witnesses don't, they believe that the cross is of pagan origin, and they don't believe Jesus died on the cross. They believe he died on an upright torture stake. So I was just starting to wake up and like question things, but I was still, that programming was still there, and I did not want him to have it or bring it in the house. But I also realized, he's a kid, and you just can't, tell him it has to be this way because I said so. Like, I wanted to be able to explain it to him so he would understand. So I was like, I'm going to look the information up. It's been a long time since I've gone through it. Like, it'd be good for me anyways. It'll help in my ministry if I ever go out again. And so they have what's called the Insight book volumes. And it's a 2-volume set, and it's basically their encyclopedia about anything to do with the Bible. So any name that you want to look up, it's almost like, it's not as good as like a Strong's Concordance, but it's their version of a biblical encyclopedia. So I looked up cross. It's not there. It says see torture stake. So I go over, look up torture stake. And one of the people that they use to back the theology of Jesus not dying on a cross goes by the name of John Denham Parsons. And knowing about Crowley and Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, that struck a chord with me. And I was like, please tell me he's not related to Jack Parsons. So I looked him up. Turns out there's no relation, just the same last name. But what I did find out was they quote in the Insight book a book called The Non-Christian Cross. And the way witnesses spin it is it's saying that Jesus died on a stake and not a cross. But they omitted some of the information when they talk about it. He basically says in the book, like, he does believe that Jesus died on a stake and not a cross. But he also says in the book that he very well could have died on a cross. He just didn't think so. Well, the witnesses and their information leave that part out. So it makes you think that he just died on the stake. Well, when I looked into John Denham Parsons, he was actually in a group called the Society for Psychical Research, which is a paranormal society. They do seances, they have, spirit mediums, go to haunted houses. I mean, anything that witnesses are not supposed to be involved in is what they're into. And so I started questioning that. And then it made me question, why is it they always try and take away the deity of Jesus being God, like just making him God's son? And they would, argue circles and saying that the Trinity's not true. And I don't want to get into whether it is or not, that doesn't matter. But I noticed over and over again, they are using people who are involved in occult societies and organizations to back some of their theology. And if it's a Christian organization, like I would say you should probably look at people who are Christian, but they had to turn to other sources for that. And so in doing so, looking further, I started looking into their New World Translation Bible. Most biblical scholars think it's like one of the worst translations are out there, but that's not how they spin it to witnesses. They're saying these scholars are giving it all sorts of praise and it's so wonderful and this and that. But one of the main things that a lot of people in Christian groups kind of latch onto in that translation is John 1:1, and it talks about Jesus. How does it go? It says, Jesus was the Word, and the Word was with God, or the Word was God, is how most Bibles translate it. But theirs say the Word was a God with a little g. And so again, it's taking deity away from Jesus. And the weird thing was the other Bible that translates it the same way was by a guy named Grieber, who was an
Johann Grieber, right?
Yeah, he's an ex-Catholic priest. Yeah, and he started getting into channeling, and his wife started channeling, and how it was channeled, their version of the Bible reads the same way right there and in a lot of different areas.
Okay, he claims to have gotten messages from spirits about how to translate this.
Exactly. Yep.
He was channeling. He channeled stuff to get these readings, and that's what they base some of their stuff off of, right, Jack?
Yeah. Well, they don't say that they. How do I put this? It wasn't copied from his Bible. At least that's what they say. But they were using his Bible as a reference, saying, "Well, see, this other Bible says the same thing, so." It's okay. It must be right since this other one does. But once they were questioned enough about it, they said that they, knew that it was a spiritistic version of the Bible and they got rid of it. But if you look back at the letters that were written and what came out in their kingdom ministry, they knew about it, that it was a spirit channeling, and still used it to back their theology for a while. Later on, they said, they no longer use it. And I don't think they use it as a argument like for it anymore. But just, again, another occult connection there.
Yeah.
One of the other things was the guy who wrote the Sherlock Holmes books. He was also in the Society for Psychical Research, and he was quoted in, I believe it was a 1924 Golden Age magazine, which was the magazine before the Awake magazine had come out. It was that year's version of the Awake. And in it, he says something along the lines of, see, even the demons believe something is going to happen in 1925, because back then they were preaching that something big was coming.
Yep.
I don't recall if it was Armageddon or something, but they said something.
The same dude, Judge Rutherford, he called 1917, 1925, and I think 1914, 1915, and 1918.
Yeah, they gave a lot of different dates.
They weren't batting a million, and people still, that's impressive. People still listen to it.
Yeah, yeah, and it was fun every time. Every time it didn't work out.
That's almost as bad as Trust the Plan.
Right?
Like, no, you didn't see nothing. It didn't happen. But trust the plan. These Jehovah's need to start going to their houses. They need members.
Yeah. It's crazy. So before we were talking, we had mentioned the persecution that's happening over in Russia with the witnesses. There was a guy who kind of came to their defense. And from looking at, I'm not sure how respected he is in his field. And like, I don't want to paint him in a bad light. But he was defending the witnesses, but it seems like he's basically like a professional apologist for cults and high control groups. He had sent, I think, Patriot, I sent you a talk that he did to a group of Satanists about Satanism. But this is the guy that the Watchtower uses to defend them, basically. But it's Dr. Massimo Intravine. I'm probably pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I remember you sending me that. That was really interesting.
Yeah. And so his most popular book on Amazon is called Satanism: A Social History. But he also defends the Plymouth Brethren, which Crowley came out of. He defends Mormonism, Masonry, and he also belongs to some, like the Society for Dracula or Society of Dracula, something like that. They basically,
it's got to be like some Aquino shit.
Yeah, from what I saw, he's just dressed like Dracula, and they're like reading Dracula stories. It's how it's fun, but I don't know.
That's something that we see a lot for some reason. The more that we research this stuff with Masonry and other groups, it seems like they really have. I mean, even my experience in the Golden Dawn, it's like they always want to diminish for some reason the importance of Jesus.
Yeah,
and to make him not a god, not the son of God, but an important teacher. Whether that's true or not, it's just very curious that we keep seeing that same thing over and over again.
Yeah, definitely.
Jack, did you have any stuff on Judge Rutherford? Because I thought he was a pretty interesting character, and I think probably me, you, and Lux could all talk about him for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So after Russell had passed away, he had died. Let's see, Russell died in 1916, October 31st. Just odd that he dies on Halloween night. And I know you guys know that's an important date for a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
There's people have made the claim.
They say the veil is the thinnest at that time. So they say.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Some people think he was poisoned. Some people think he sacrificed himself. I mean, witnesses don't, but that's just, the conspiracy side of people will talk about that. But Judge Rutherford took over. Funny enough, though, is he was an attorney and he was used by the Watchtower organization. But Russell, in his will, had actually willed somebody else to take over the presidency. But after he had passed, somehow Rutherford came in and he kind of strong-armed his way into a position. And so what I gathered, the information that I had heard was he had let go of some of the board members because, a lot of witnesses don't keep this in mind. It's a corporation, so there has to be board members, and they all jointly have to make a decision about the corporation. So he fired or got rid of them somehow, 2 or 3 of them, just enough to where he put people in place that he could swing the vote back his way to become the president, which is essentially what he did. But they ended up calling him Judge Rutherford because the district that he was serving as an attorney, there's like a judge that was out sick, and so they asked him to do it. So I think he was a judge for a day, and he just kept the title.
Yeah, I think Lux was the one that told me first, and I was like, "What?" I think he texted me, and I was like, "Yo, that guy wasn't even a judge. He just called himself." I was like, "Yo, what?"
Yeah, it's yeah. So he had a bunch of crazy ideas. He made the organization much more strict than it was before. Before they didn't believe in the disfellowshipping policy. In fact, at one time they said that excommunication was of pagan origin. But I think it was really just a way for them to kind of bash the Catholic Church at the time.
Yeah.
But they also brought out about, the Druids used to do it and this and that. But I think it was like 14 or 16 years later, they introduced the disfellowshipping policy. But from what I've been told and read, it was due to enforce the no blood policy. So when witnesses can no longer take blood transfusions, it was at one time it was considered acceptable, but for whatever reason they decided it was no longer acceptable, but they needed a way to enforce that, and so to do so they put the disfellowshipping policy in place.
That's pretty interesting to me too, with the blood transfusion aspect, because you see that with a lot of occult groups, the belief that your blood is really important and sacred, and that you're not supposed to mix it with a different blood, even if it's from the same type as yours.
Yeah, and there is a bunch of other crazy stuff about him. I mean, he made references in their publications. Like, this isn't apostate information. If witnesses are hearing that, you can go back and look at their old publications, and Rutherford actually said the Holy Spirit no longer works. Instead, we're getting messages from angels. And when I read that, I was like, I mean, maybe to a Christian like that doesn't know anything about the occult or magic, they wouldn't think anything of it. There's people claiming to talk to angels or angels saved me or this and that. But, once you get into ceremonial magic, it's like, depending on what flavor you're going with, the majority of entities you're contacting are angels, right?
Yes.
I mean, especially with Enochian magic, at least.
Exactly.
Well, at least they pose to be angels.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Some of them might give you tasks to do, and I wouldn't consider that an angel anymore. So who knows what you're really dealing with. But before you go on, I want to say that this actually, you're talking about this now, makes sense about his. He had $1 million mansion back in San Diego in 1925. No, sorry, 1929.
Yeah.
In 1925, I think he wrote a book called How Millions Living Won't Die, and he was like trying to tell all the Jehovah's that the world was coming to an end, but you guys would all live on. But then eventually, he built this mansion in San Diego that he said he was leaving for like 4 returning entities, and it was called Beth Serene, which is the House of Princes in Hebrew. Yeah, so in the names, I wish I would have wrote them down. I was actually hoping maybe you knew. But they were, I'm almost positive, angel names. Or if they were biblical names at least. So I found it very weird that instead of one God, now you're splitting it up to 4. Now, is that to represent the 4 parts of the Enochian tablets, the 4 elements?
Oh, I get what you're saying. From what I understood, the way he spun it was some of the returning biblical patriarchs. So I apologize. I forgot exactly who it was. I want to say it was Abraham and some of they weren't angels, but considered actual people that lived during biblical times.
Yeah, they're from biblical stories, right? I knew they were made up characters. I knew that.
They were going to be resurrected, and so they would need a place to live, and they would also need a place to live where it was a very similar climate from what they were used to. So they go to sunny San Diego and plant a bunch of palm trees on the property, but people were suffering from the Depression back then, and the guy was driving Cadillacs.
Yep, I have that. He had 2 6-cylinder Cadillacs during the Depression.
Yeah, and he was actually an opposer of government. What do you call it? Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. With the moonshine and all that.
Prohibition?
Abolition.
Yeah, he was against prohibition, and so he kind of got a reputation for being a drunk. And this is how good of a person he is. His wife and his son didn't even attend his funeral.
Wow.
So that should give you some kind of idea what type of person he was in his personal life. There's a channel called Watchtower History and on YouTube, and these guys do incredible research. And they had actually dug up some information through newspaper articles and diaries from people and some of the old publications. But they found information that talked about Rutherford being caught coming out of some kind of burlesque show. And this person was basically trying to put him on blast and to get him in trouble. And he flipped it on the guy, and that guy ended up getting in trouble somehow. So it's just him. It's like over and over again. It just sounds like a cult leader,
But listen, I don't know if I even told Lux about this. This is what I found, and I was like, yo, this is fucking wild. In 1933, this guy, he had a radio station. There were 403 stations nationwide. It was WBBR. And this guy would go on there and talk shit about clergy, religions, and like politicians and politics. This guy was on the fucking radio, dude, talking shit.
That's crazy especially during that time, that early in the 19th century.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, he actually had gotten arrested. I think it was some of the information that was in their book, The Finished Mystery. Something about that book painted America in a bad light. And so he got, I forgot what the claim was from the police, but it's something along the lines of it inciting anti-patriotism or something along those lines. So he had gotten arrested. But in doing so, him and some of the key members at the Bethel family, once they were imprisoned, eventually they were able to get out, and some kind of freedom of religion, freedom of speech. They had won a court case, and so they got released. But they ended up kind of weaving that into future books and biblical prophecy. So they say by the year 1918, Jesus had returned invisibly, and he had basically sanctioned Jehovah's Witnesses as God's true organization. And it was all chalked up because he had been arrested and was released by that time. So that's how they kind of weave that into their prophecy and belief system, which they still hold true today. Witnesses still believe that.
Wow. Yeah. I'm curious, during that, did you ever hear sort of like this inner order ever called the Order of Melchizedek, or something along those lines, sort of like the people who are handing down the knowledge from on high, like the inner circle or the inner order?
There were rumors that I had heard. There was I feel bad, I forgot her name. There's a British lady that had done a video and about some inner documents from the organization, and they made a reference to something they called the Order. But from what I had been told that's referring to what they call the Gilead School, which is basically where they train their missionaries to go around the world. So it's like a very intense learning for I don't know how many months that they do that, and then they're like sent into their missionary work. But recently, a friend of mine, this lady named Tracy Harriet, had posted something, and she gave me permission to share it. There is a book that she had bought. It's a collector's item now, but it's called Pastor Russell's Sermons. And this book also uses that winged sun disk, same as Book of the Law. They give it a different spin, of course.
Yep, that stuff's up in the screen. I've put it up there. It's in everything.
Yeah, but on page 5, just read in the middle, it says, "I wish to draw your notice the fact that the Almighty God himself is and then it goes to a subheading, founder of a secret society. And then below that, it kind of goes through the next few pages, mentions something about the Order of Melchizedek.
Aha!
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So now people have made claims. As soon as I put that up, oh, that's fake, that's Photoshop, you can tell it's been manipulated. If you take a closer look at it, you can see that the print kind of bleeds through the page. So nothing's been manipulated. And from what I've been able to gather in older books, a lot of times they would finish a sentence off with the next subheading. So if you, I'll send you a picture so you could post that up, NY Patriot, so people know what I'm talking about. But
yeah,
for sure.
But yeah, anytime you present any type of photo information, people just, that's photoshopped. It's apostate lies. Like they all go to the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is because I'll send the slide to New York Patriot, but there is a secret society called the Fraternitatis Rosicrucius out of Pennsylvania, not too far from where I think that C.T. Russell sort of grew up and was around, but they have an inner order called the Order of Melchizedek. And that's definitely a very, very serious Rosicrucian secret society. So that's interesting.
That's wild. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's some people I've been talking to. It's some crazy information for sure. There's things kind of pointing to the Rosicrucians in some ways, with Russell and even with Rutherford. It was like the Knights of I can't even pronounce it, but it's another fraternal order that actually was printed in a newspaper that mentions Joseph F. Rutherford, and it was from the same town that he was actually living in. Something about him giving a toast, but it's essentially it's another Masonic order,
right.
And the what's it called? The coat of arms. If you look at the old Zion's Watchtower when it was in black and white, there's a knight's armor and a coat of arms in the right-hand corner, and that order's medals and that knight are really, if not exact, it's really close. So I don't know. It draws more questions. Like I said, we're not proving anything. I'm not here to tell people what to think or that it's for sure, but I just want to present some information and let people draw their own conclusions, what they think about it.
Yeah, and in the Watchtower and Masons, Springmeyer, who we touched upon earlier in the episode, claimed that C.T. Russell was in fact a Knights Templar and also a Freemason.
Yeah, that's, the Freemason thing, that's an endless topic of debate among ex-witnesses. And I'm inclined to believe that there was definitely an influence there. I can't say for sure that Russell was a Mason. I've had people who have family who are high-ranking Freemasons that make the claim that he was, they know for a fact, but no proof's been presented to me yet.
Right.
But, when you look back at the Cross and Crown, they give their own explanation for it, but, that also points to the Knights Templar. Also, Christian Science uses it. I think there's a Catholic order that uses that too somewhere, and I believe the Rosicrucians have a version of it. So there's a lot of crossing over back and forth between different orders. But in my opinion, when you see these groups, each of them have their own interpretation for something, but they use the same symbols or very similar to each other. So It makes me feel that there's some kind of spiritual current that's going through each of these. And when you look at symbolism, you have the esoteric version, which the inner order would know, and then there's your exoteric version that only your rank and file people would know. So it really depends on how much weight you want to give symbolism. But people who are involved in fraternal orders, give them a lot of weight. So I don't know, something to think about.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I had a few things I wanted to go over. Now, I don't know how authentic it is. It is stuff that I have found online. Let me just cover this stuff. I don't know how authentic it is. I just want to put it out there because it is about Russell. Supposedly in some 1915 Bible student souvenir convention report, it was kind of like a Bible thing with people that would go to it. And there was a discourse supposedly by him in the subject, the Temple of God. And in this, it says, I am very glad to have the particular opportunity of saying a word about some of the things in which we agree with our Masonic friends. Because we are speaking in a building dedicated to Masonry, and we also are Masons. I am a Freemason. I am a free and accepted Mason, if I may carry the matter to its full length, because that is what our Masonic brethren like to tell us. And it goes on a little bit more. We are going to discuss free and accepted Masonry, the Bible Masonry, my dear friends. Blessed are eyes, for they see. Not everybody has the hearing ear and the seeing eye. It is only those who have come into this divine Masonry that have the spiritual insight and this spiritual guidance and may know the things that are freely given unto us. It is something that is freely given to one class and not intended for anybody else. That was some stuff that supposedly was in that book. If that's true.
Yeah, no, that is true. He did give that talk or that sermon back then in a Masonic hall. So the way they spin it is because it was at a Masonic hall, they knew Freemasons were going to be there. And so the language that he was using was to attract Freemasons or to show, some kind of brotherly love there towards them. I don't know. Everybody has a different opinion about it. Like I said before, I'm kind of inclined to think about the esoteric meaning. So fellow Masons and whatever inner order there might be would know what he's meaning. Well, the exoteric meaning, your rank and file members, Bible students that were there would have just thought like, oh, he's just using it as an example to try and, like, witnesses, they say, like, Paul became all things to all men. And so they tell that to them while they're learning to try and basically find a common ground with somebody in their preaching work. So if you see toys in the yard, oh, they have kids. Oh, I got kids too. Oh, what school do they go to? Something along those lines. Like, he's just trying to connect with them in one way is how they spin it. Gotcha. But I'm more inclined to think the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to continue in the next one because we got about 1 minute and 5 seconds left. It's fucking Zoom. So
thank you guys.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, it's all right. There. No, it's coming out fine. I mean, I still have plenty of stuff. We got another episode. So please, everybody, please like, subscribe, share, pass it on. And everybody be well until the next one. Later.